Many WoW players have come to understand male Transmog to be the cold shoulder of good-looking armor in WoW. Many memes have sprouted throughout the history of bad male Transmogs, but that doesn't stop players of this armor type to still seek out highly coveted pieces of the sort. Starting us off at number 10, we have the Chains of the Scarlet Crusade Ensemble. Not to be confused with the plate version of a similar name, this version of the set gives the exact same reward, but instead for hunters, shamans, and evokers. This set was added at the start of the Legion expansion and reveals itself to be a simple garment of the Scarlet Crusade's most common NPCs. The Scarlet Crusade is a faction of Lordaeron humans dating back to Vanilla WoW that seek to purge all undead in the world. Their fanatical views would eventually be twisted and manipulated by the Dreadlords, and the Scarlets would become convinced that anyone who isn't human is probably an undead. So that totally innocent gnome that did nothing wrong was considered undead to them and would be killed on sight. They have stronger lore outside of the summary, but to speed things up, that's the general view of them, hoisting colors of both red and ivory. The Scarlets have been a fan-favorite antagonist of the WoW player base simply due to the strong connections they have with the undead and by proxy, Arthas. Their creation wouldn't exist in the first place if not for Arthas, and it's interesting for players to witness the result of the devastation the Scourge left behind in this process, creating a sect of religious zealots that originally derived from the Knights of the Silver Hand. In order to obtain this set, you must venture into the Scarlet Hall's instance from Mist of Pandaria. The original Scarlet Monastery works as well, but you'll likely find an easier time farming the following steps if you just go with the MOP version instead. Once zoned into the dungeon, simply run ahead and kill Arms Master Harlan on either normal or heroic difficulty. Doing so triggers a small chance for the Scarlet Tabard to drop, roughly 1.74%, and once looted, you would then need to travel to the Darkmoon Fair. Once you arrive at the fair, you must locate an NPC named the Scarlet Quartermaster that allows you to purchase the Ensemble for 10,000 gold if you're wearing the tabard that you just farmed from Harlan. When learned, you will then be able to transmog on any male character the facade of a Scarlet NPC, suiting your needs as you see fit. This set is mainly sought after for its roleplay usefulness, as a good majority wish to portray their characters as Scarlet due to being such large fans of the fantasy. It's not a complicated farm in the slightest, but it is surely wanted amongst male users because of the appeal to old WoW lore, especially since you don't need to be human to wear it, adding a humorous sense of irony to wearing it as something like an undead themselves. Basically, you'll just be running Scarlet Halls quite a bit and dropping a solid amount of gold, landing at number 10 for not being overly difficult, but still a wanted piece of Transmog regardless. And at number 9, we have the Frozen Claw Mantle shoulder pads. These shoulder pads come from the Vault of the Incarnates raid and are commonly recognized as the very first Evoker tier set shoulder pads. Being a brand new class and having an exclusive tier set to that class already makes a tier set's look a worthwhile farm. What makes this Transmog stand out, however, is that it is the only Evoker exclusive item that is able to be transmogged by all classes of the male armor type due to the fact that it's a bind on equip item. Because of this, many transmog hunters will wager hundreds of thousands of gold on the auction house for these shoulders and are frequently the objective of attraction for hunters and shamans. Evokers themselves can just obtain it through their tier set because this is a BOE that can only come from trash mobs of the Vault of Incarnates itself. BOEs are already pretty rare, and you can go a few weeks with your raiding team before seeing anyone on your team actually get one. On top of that, the loot table of a BOE is completely random, and you might get an item that you don't actually want. So farming these shoulders is a bit harder than some might think it to be. But all you really need to do is farm the trash of Vault on repeat every week, fetching you a pretty good sale of gold or unique Mog appearance for your Hunter's Earthen style Transmog. And at number 8, we have the Path of Ascension Transmogs from Shadowlands. During Shadowlands, when a player would select their designated covenant, they were given an NPC that provides Sanctum upgrades. These upgrades typically increase your open world activity and resource gain, but each of the 4 covenants, Kirin, Necrolord, Venthyr, and Nightfae, had a sort of mini-game upgrade that allowed you to participate in unique modes for exclusive cosmetics. In the case of the Kirin Covenant, you could participate in the Path of Ascension. This mode would allow you to pilot your soulbinds through vehicle-like combat. In the current version of this activity, your health will scale up to your level, but not your damage. So the best way to approach it is at max level, just so you don't actually have to worry about the mechanics. During the time you're piloting your character, you will fight against a various number of bosses with different mechanics. Typically in Shadowlands, you'd have to approach each boss differently and play against them multiple times for each of your soulbinds, as the character you controlled all had different styles of gameplay that had to be learned to defeat the encounters. However, now you don't really need to pay much attention to this. Each boss has a certain difficulty level, and the higher the difficulty, the more adds, HP, and health the boss gains. If you defeat every single encounter with every single soulbind, you'll be rewarded with the Discipline of Humility achievement that in turn gives you the Ensemble Chain of the Discordant. This is the main talking point of this entry, as the content was extremely bugged when it was current. and you'd have to use extremely unorthodox methods to actually beat the encounters, as some were borderline impossible without exploits. An example of this being with Clea and intentionally losing against the Mad Mortimer boss. You would then spawn a target dummy and redo the fight when you filled your energy bar to full, as a large portion of your damage was founded upon ramp. Finishing the trials in general, no matter the difficulty variance, would reward you with the Chain of the Reverend, a more bronze apparel rather than the darker colors in purple. For the number 7 spot, we have the Venerated Spirits Shaman tier from Antorus, the Burning Throated Legion. This set is incredibly simple to farm and just comes from many bosses of Antorus Raid for Shamans. It has 6 total recolors, if you include the non-elite PvP versions, and each holds a special aesthetic similar to that of the Zandalari Trolls. The main set we're talking about this entry is the Mythic set. It's highly sought after because it's just super cool. Debatably one of the best Shaman sets Blizzard has ever brought into WoW. It's also one of the few transmogs in the game that leans an entire race's culture into its appearance, outside of heritage armor transmogs. What's sort of strange, but also interesting, is that it somewhat foreshadowed the next expansion to follow Legion, Battle for Azeroth. It's easy to tell this set was inspired off of Zandalari Trolls, and those same trolls would play a massive role in the BFA expansion, contemplating some potential theories that the tier sets were supposed to actually carry over into BFA before being retired. Another example of this is the Hunter set from the exact same raid, showing a very Naga-inspired set when we would journey to Nazjatar itself later in BFA's lifecycle. It could be far-fetched, but it's interesting to see what we could have gotten. For number 6, we have the Battleforge and Blood Knight armor sets. These sets both share the exact same appearance and only vary in their names. This set was added in the Burning Crusade and would often drop from mobs in dungeons or in higher level zones. Now, these sets aren't incredibly amazing, even for the Burning Crusade standards with the low polygons that follow it. You can usually get this armor on the auction house for a pretty standard price, even on roleplay realms, so it's certainly a well farmed out piece of Mog due to the high demand. But why is it wanted? Well, if you equip this set on a female character, the armor pieces become much more revealing and risque. Players can have whatever reason they want to dress their character up in, but because this set is one of the very few that actually hides more, despite being armor, it's highly sought after for a certain transmog aesthetic, and anyone can really figure out what that look is. If it's something you like, go for it. And at number 5, we have the Crown of Destruction. This helmet drops from Ragnaros in the Molten Core raid from Vanilla WoW. This crown, while as old as the game itself, has been a subject of farm material for male wearers for a very long time. It's not hard to really get it all, as you just need to go kill near 20-year-old boss and loot it, getting it or not. It's just simply a nice mog to have equipped for a fiery aesthetic, despite its low resolution and old age. Even when you consider that it actually holds up rather well, allowing players to take its namesake rather literally. Many players actually look at this helmet as a real crown, and since it's from Ragnaros himself, it helps adorn your character a bit more than the next person. Even on higher resolution mogs, because this helmet appears above your character's head and is mostly a simple jewel, it helps capture a sort of royalty look that you might be going for that just fully completes an already red transmog. So it finds itself at number 5 on our list. And at number 4, we have the Icy Scale Set. This set originally only comprised 3 different slots: the chest, hands, and bracers. These were all learned via Mastercraft Omarion. In Vanilla WoW, before Wrath of the Lich King revamped Naxxramas, players could find this NPC if they were a master blacksmith, leatherworker, or tailor, and he would teach you these unique recipes to your armor type. However, when the revamped Naxxramas actually came to be, this NPC was completely removed alongside his teachings to learn the items. So it wasn't until Dragonflight, a whole 9 expansions later, that these items were made obtainable again with the return of the older version of Naxxramas. Because of such a long hiatus of being able to obtain these items, especially since the only previous way was someone who already had the original recipes, fetching it for millions of gold, this entire set is highly wanted by players just for its rarity alone. In order to get this set, you can send in a work order to a friend or random player with the already existing recipes, and they can craft it for you, getting you the item. If you cannot send in a work order, or would rather farm out the recipe yourself, you'll instead need to unlock the original version of Naxxramas, which is a pretty lengthy process of unlocking the old Skullomance and running Stratholme a bunch. Doing so will reward you with Scorch Stones, and these Scorch Stones can be turned into Omarion in the Eastern Plaguelands in exchange for old recipes of these items. After that, it's just gathering the necessary materials for the actual recipe and then crafting it yourself, which is the easy part. To put it to a great summary, you'll be running a pretty large deal of the old version of Old Skullomance and any of the current existing Wings of Stratholme to get these Scourge Stones. You'll need 3 Argent Dawn Valor tokens for each recipe, totaling to about 24 of the tokens. There are many guides to help describe this process in full, including the top 10 hardest to obtain transmogs video that goes over it a bit in more detail if you want to get a better understanding. Worst case scenario, you can find a person with a recipe and just pay them a bunch of gold for their services. And at number 3, we have the Dragonrider's harness. This chess piece comes from the Island Expeditions mode from Battle for Azeroth. Island Expeditions were an ever-changing game mode where you would find new creatures and environments every time you journeyed into one. Your objective is to collect as much Azerite as possible before the opposite faction bought NPCs, or players if you queue for the PvP mode. Once you collect a certain amount of Azerite, you beat the enemy team and are rewarded with a random amount of Seafarer's doubloons. These doubloons can be exchanged for chests and various other cosmetic items from a nearby cabinet NPC. At random, every island will have different creatures spawning on it. Depending on what spawns is what determines what loot you will receive when the island ends. So an example is that when you complete an island expedition with the black dragonflight present on it, you will have a chance to receive the chestplate from the sentry, hence the Dragonrider's name it has. This applies to all of the loot within the island expeditions, and these items are all bind on equip, so you can find them on the auction house as well for a hefty penny. The reason this chest piece in particular is so wanted is because it is one of the only ones in the game that gives your characters tattoos in the process. They also are in the shape of dragons themselves, making it especially cool for players trying to capture a Dragonrider or Vicruel aesthetic to the fullest. You'll often see this chest piece going for a couple 100,000 gold, and anything below that might be a steal depending on your server. You can also get it from the Venture Co box in particular when you exchange your previously mentioned doubloons for it, so less grind is necessary, thankfully. And at number 2, we have the Kor'kron Dark Shaman set from the Siege of Orgrimmar. During the grind of Mog farming, when people think of the Siege of Orgrimmar, they imagine the Tusk of Manaroth before anything else. I mean, it's one of the most farmed transmogs in the entire game, rather than just a plate piece of transmog. However, what many people fail to realize or remember is that one of the previous bosses leading to Garrosh Hellscream, the Dark Shamans, is that they too wield an incredibly rare cosmetic. Instead of just the shoulder pads, however, you instead get an entire set for your Shaman character, and only your Shaman character. Many people forget this actually exists because when you go to farm Siege of Orgrimmar, it's with the tusks in mind, so you would need a plate character to properly farm it. This set needs you to be a Shaman, so very few people actually have it or make the time to farm it since they are more concerned about the tusks initially. To farm this set, you must simply kill the Dark Shaman's raid encounter and loot them. If you're lucky enough, you will receive the Kor'kron Shaman's treasure item via personal loot, and opening it will contain every single piece of transmog set in cosmetic form. What players will realize upon equipping this set is that you look exactly like the bosses you just killed, allowing you to fully cosplay an actual raid boss like people were already trying to do via the Tusk of Manaroth or even the Pauldron of Zakul. This set is actually one of the rarest in the game, possibly rivaling that of even Garrosh's Tusk because there is no quick skip to this boss as opposed to Garrosh nowadays. You must clear the first boss and onwards to reach a Dark Shaman, where there is undoubtedly the most RP that takes place. You'll especially feel the farm slow down in Immersius and Galakras due to the intermission phases and waiting that you have to do, which is why the skip to Garrosh was added in the first place. But the Dark Shaman has no such skip, unfortunately, further adding to the Shaman player's grind. You can also find the box that gives you the cosmetics in the black market auction house, but this can be extremely hit or miss, as it may never actually show up on your realm or go for millions of gold at a time, depending how much people on your server are willing to purchase it for. It also cannot be bonus rolled with Warforged seals, as these were created with the sole purpose of letting you obtain extra gear, and the treasure itself was excluded from this rule. There's not even a marked percentage chance on the rarity of the set, so it definitely becomes more wanted in the process simply due to the prestige from the large farm it presents the average person. Boo, I'm from the future.
OMG, are you me from the future?
No, I'm just from the future.
Oh, well, can I help you?
Yes, on June 8th, something amazing is going to happen.
Oh, is that when I meet my future wife? Or maybe land my dream job?
Even better, it's when the new VTuber Corp started by the Duologs is launched, and it takes the world by storm.
What's a VTuber Corp?
Oh, it's kind of like a talent agency where they hire on talented streamers and take a cut of their earnings in order to hire managers, editors, set up whatever merch they want, and organize conventional appearances for them.
That sounds like a scam. Why would a streamer want to sign up for that when they can do it themselves?
Because the logistics behind doing all that extra stuff is a huge pain in the butt, and they'd rather just focus on streaming.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. So are the ones from Glitch Stars any good?
Well, you'll have to see for yourself on June 8th. Just click the link in the video description and watch. You pay for the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge.
So you have to pay for it?
No, it's free. That's just a saying. And at number 1, we have the Cryptstalker and Earthshatterer tier 3 sets from the original Naxxramas. Similar to the 4th entry on this list, you must first unlock the old Scholomance and run Stratholme a bunch in order to properly get these sets. Doing so will eventually grant you access to the version of Naxxramas that exists in vanilla, with all of its previous transmogs and more. To obtain either of these sets, you will need to speak to the NPC named Zakaket Skullmash, allowing you to exchange score stones for Death's Bargaining chips. Now, these bargaining chips can be used to purchase Dented Raider's gear, which, when used, has a chance to be Lamented Crusader's armor. This is required to craft the old tier 3 sets. To actually craft them, you're going to need a lot of gold, some RNG, and someone who already has a fully finished tier 3 set, either from vanilla or from the newer method. Once you've obtained a Lamented Crusader's armor piece, you must repair it using something like a Scourge Scales, which is specific to the male armor sets. This is where someone already with the set comes in, as only they can craft you this material. Once you have the armor, you can purify it using Phylacter Weave and Righteous Orbs. Phylacter Weave comes from the Dented Raider's armor pieces, or can be bought for 2,000 gold each. A complete set of tier 3 will require you to have 1,400 Phylacter Weave, or 2.8 million gold, and 80 Righteous Orbs. Essentially, you're going to be killing Naxxramas, Scholomance, and Stratholme bosses a bunch, while simultaneously dropping a ton of gold down for your tier 3. And that completes our list. Male Mogs are usually the laughingstock of Transmog, but there are still highly wanted pieces of gear regardless.